Today I want to talk to you about how to get really crisp final product out of Filmora 9. I know some of you have had issues with getting pixelation, or some of your final videos look a little blockish or blurry. Well, there's things that you can do right in your video project settings and within your export settings so that your final product leaving Filmora 9 looks as crisp as the video files that you brought in. Let's dig in. So you guys probably know one of the things that I love to do is make sure I white balance everything and use a white card so that I can get my colors correct in my videos. That's the reason I'm holding that white card up in the first place. I do have videos explaining that, and I'll put one of them up in the cards and down in the description if you want to learn more about that. Now, first off, any footage that you have, if you right click on it up in your import window, you can scroll down to properties. And if you click on that, it'll give you the information on the footage you're using. You can see if it's in H.264. You can see if it's full HD, 1920 by 1080. You can see the frame rate that you filmed it at and the bit rate that it's sitting at currently. I personally prefer filming at 60 frames a second, here it's 59.9, and at a higher bit rate, something that's over 50,000 kbps. I think that just looks better, not only coming in, but going out as well. It tends to be more crisp. So make sure the original footage that you brought into your project is solid and clear and is going to do what you want before you even start working with it. The next place you want to pay attention to is if you click under File in the upper left, scroll down to Project Settings, it'll tell you what your project is actually set at. Currently, my project is set at 1920 by 1080 full HD, and it's set at the same 59.9 60 frames per second rate that my content was filmed at. So I know my project is going to be working with the same frame rate and resolution as the footage I brought into it. If you also click on File and scroll down to Preferences, and then scroll over to Performance, you'll see that this allows you to enable your GPU acceleration, which makes files move more quickly while you're working with them, but it also allows you to set proxy files that has Filmora work with smaller resolution and size files in your project while you're editing, and then defaults back to the higher resolution, larger files on export. Now, I've realized that some computers that don't really meet all the system specs of Filmora properly don't always export with those high resolution files or have issues using proxy settings. So if you are having problems with resolution on your export, consider turning off the automatic proxy files and resetting your project, restarting it without that enabled, and see if that helps you out at all. The other thing I want you to be aware of is over here, right under the preview window, you can click and open up the playback quality. Now, by default, it's set to half, which means anything that you're viewing while you're editing is only half the resolution of what is actually going to be exported. And sometimes people are fooled because they see the preview window looks blockish or a little blurred and they think, oh my God, my project isn't clear. But it's just the fact that Filmora is working with a smaller playback to allow it to run more smoothly. If you change that setting to full, now you'll be able to get a better idea of what the final product will look like when it's actually exported. And speaking of exports, this button up here, Export, is so important. When you click on that, let me move that over so you can see it. This will define everything that's going on with the export of your project. Now, a lot of people just click YouTube and start uploading right away and think everything is fine. But I want to warn you about something that a lot of creators have been wrestling with. People with some systems that are very close to the specs or slightly below or just barely exceed the system requirements, they start running into issues while they're trying to edit a project and upload it to YouTube all at the same time. You're asking Filmora to do a lot of things all at once. I personally prefer to export locally. If you click on the local tab, that will allow you to take your project and export it to your computer before it ever goes up to YouTube. You don't have to wrestle with any of your internet connection speeds and have that be an issue. YouTube doesn't recognize itself as a storage facility. If files are lost, they don't guarantee that they can get them back. So anything you've worked hard on, I absolutely recommend export it locally. Have a hard copy of the thing that you worked on so that if, God forbid, something happens on YouTube, you have another copy that you can upload again and you control your own content. Now, when it comes to the actual export settings, you can see that it's popping in what I was using in my project settings, but you can actually click on settings and redefine how you want this exported. Don't just choose good, better, best. Some people click on best thinking, well, that's what it is. But you can go in and you can say, this is the exact resolution I want. I'm working with 1920 by 1080. Here's the frame rate that I want to stay consistent to my original footage, 59.94 FPS. And I've already got this project set to 50,000 kbps as custom, but the default is only about 8,000. Even under best, it only goes slightly higher. You can set your own custom kbps bitrate up to 80,000 kbps. So I suggest going with a higher value. Bitrate is completely underrated. If you increase the frame rate of what you're filming and the bitrate of what you're filming, it's going to be a lot clearer, even if you're filming in 1080 as opposed to 4K, because it's a higher resolution file. It's got more information in it. All the details will start coming out more clearly and more crisply. Another thing in your audio is I personally like to use 48,000 hertz, and you can use 44.1. That's CD standard, that's fine. But make sure your bit rate is up. Again, I think it defaults to about 192. I won't use anything less than 320, and I've gone higher depending on what the particular thing I'm doing. If it has a lot of deep audio effects, I want to make sure those super lows sound really crisp on better systems, and the highs don't get minced in any way. I think you guys have all heard, sometimes you listen to an MP3 that isn't great quality, and the highs get really kind of squashed and weird sounding, almost warbly. So make sure you're using a really high bit rate on your audio export so your sound is as good as your video export and everything is really high quality. Once you've got that all set, hit OK. Make sure you enable your GPU accelerated video encoding on export so it will export as quickly as possible, optimizing the performance of your particular system's graphics card, and then just click export. Then once you've done, you've got it saved locally, review that file, make sure it looks the way you want it to look, and then upload it to YouTube, and you'll be good to go. I hope that helped, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me down in the comments below and we'll talk about this more. And don't forget to check out this video over here showing you some other cool things that you can do in Filmora 9. Peace.